Nations adaptation to and mitigation of climate change. And as a moderator for this panel, we will have Luigi Cabrini, GSTC chairman. And as members, sorry. As members of the panel, we will have Gerben, Hardeman, responsible travel and tourism manager at the Dutch Travel Trade Association. Please be welcomed on stage. Professor David Simmons, Chair of EarthCheck Research Institute. Olaf Sleeper, Innovation Manager at German National Tourist Board. And Jerry Spooner, Director of Vanuatu Department of Tourism. Please be welcomed. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the climate change session of this conference. We have to try to maximize the time because we started a bit late and we have to finish on time. But to break the ice, and no reference at now this point with the Arctic, I would like to show you a video. This video is a poem by then 26-year-old poet Kathy Jednil Kijiner from the Marshall Islands. That poem was selected among 500 poems that were sent to the UN for the climate change conference that was held in 2014. It's a short video with a poem, and I hope you like it.
Dear Mata Filipino, you are a 7-month-old sunrise of gummy smiles. You are bald as an egg and bald as the Buddha. Your thighs that are thunder, shrieks that are lightning, so excited for bananas, hugs, and our morning walks along the lagoon. Dear Mata Filipino, I want to tell you about that lagoon, that lucid, sleepy lagoon lounging against the sunrise. Men say that one day, that lagoon will devour you. They say it will gnaw at the shoreline, chew at the roots of your breadfruit trees, gulp down rows of your seawalls, and crunch through your island's shattered bones. They say you, your daughter, and your granddaughter too, will wander rootless, with only a passport to call home. Dear Mata Filipino, don't cry. Mommy promises you, no one will come and devour you. No greedy whale of a company sharking through political seas, no backwater bullying of businesses with broken morals, no blindfolded bureaucracies gonna push this mother ocean over the edge. No one's drowning, baby. No one's moving. No one's losing their homeland. No one's gonna become a climate change refugee. Or should I say, no one else. To the Carteret Islanders of Papua New Guinea and to the Taro Islanders of Fiji, I take this moment to apologize to you. We are drawing the line here. Because baby, we are going to fight. Your mommy, daddy, boo-boo, Jimma, your country, and your president too, we will all fight. And even though there are those hidden behind platinum titles who like to pretend that we don't exist, that the Marshall Islands, Tuvalu, Kiribati, Maldives, and Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines, and floods of Pakistan, Algeria, and Colombia, and hurricanes, tidal waves, and earthquakes didn't exist? Still, there are those who see us. Hands reaching out, fists raising up, banners unfurling, megaphones booming, and we are canoes blocking coal ships. We are the radiance of solar villages. We are the rich, clean soil of the farmer's past. We are petitions blooming from teenage fingertips. We are families biking, recycling, reusing, engineers dreaming, designing, building, artists painting, dancing, writing. We are spreading the word. And there are thousands out on the street, marching with signs, hand in hand, chanting for change now. They're marching for you, baby. They're marching for us. Because we deserve to do more than just survive. We deserve to thrive. Dear Mata Filipino, You are eyes heavy with drowsy weight. So just close those eyes, baby, and sleep in peace. Because we won't let you down. You'll see.
Well, very powerful words and images, right? So I hope you liked it. Now we get into more dry information about climate change and tourism. So the issue of climate change and tourism, in fact, became an issue that started to be addressed relatively recently. In the early 2000s, UNWTO organized two conferences, one in Gerben in Tunisian islands, and then a bigger conference in Davos in 2007. Well, the issue of the relation between climate change and tourism started to come to the fore. And there were basically an important message about the relation between these two, and which we tried to condensate in a sentence. And we said tourism is a victim and a vector of climate change, because there is a strong interaction on the negative impact of climate change on destinations. One could say that tourism is one of the highest sensitive sector to the impact of climate change, and not only to the direct impact, but could also have indirect impact, for example, on changing of policies regarding long-haul flight or measures about reducing CO2s, etc. So that was a major study done in 2007, and there was then kind of an analysis, more detailed analysis of what would be, in fact, the impact of climate change on destinations. And we came out with this short list: warmer summers, warmer winters, the precipitation change, the increased extreme events. We're seeing that with the intensity and number of hurricanes and tornadoes and fires. Biodiversity loss, both land and marine. Sea level rise. We'll talk about that with Jerry. In small islands are probably those who are more affected by this change. Increase of disease, highest temperature, make, for example, longer season for mosquitoes in certain destinations. And then the impact of mitigations on tourist mobility. Travel costs increase, maybe because of CO2 taxations. And then finally, indirect societal change impact. We are seeing, unfortunately, number of climate refugees increasing. That has an impact on society as such, and indirectly has an impact also on the tourist flows. The stronger impact of climate change are on a certain region, what we call the hotspot areas, which are basically mostly coastal areas: Caribbean, Mediterranean, Indian Ocean, Australia, New Zealand, Pacific Ocean. And then we try to calibrate what is the impact of each one of the consequences of climate change on each of them. But I must say that recently we are seeing that spreading even to other regions. We're seeing Venice, where they had the highest flood in the last 150 years. We see California, where the fires have been stronger and longer and more difficult to control than ever. This is just some image. This is a photo of Venice a few years ago, but as you know, a couple of months ago, we went through the same, and even in a more difficult situation. So, as I said, we should address from the two perspectives on adaptations and the mitigation. When we look at the adaptation of the tourist sector, we see which part of the tourist chain is more flexible and easier to adapt, and which part of the tourist chain require a longer planning. And then, of course, the tourists, the travelers, are those who have the highest flexibility. If I know that in a certain destination it's going to be too hot or too warm, or the beach has eroded and I don't like to go there anymore, I just change, make a click in my computer to go somewhere else. Then we have the mobile actors, the tour operators, transport providers that may require 3, 4, 5 years in order to readjust their policy, their offers. And then finally, the hotel, resorts, attraction operators community, where the adaptation time it's much longer and need a much forward planning. And to visualize that, you can see how the different consequence of climate change, the time that they will require for the different parts of the tourist chain to adapt. So if we, for example, see, I don't know, snow reliability on mountain destinations, and we see the impact that we have from a very mild impact in the first year, but you can see as of the 2040 to 2050, the impact will be such that, for example, a study showed that about half of the alpine ski resorts below 1,500 meters will have to close down. And then health of coral reefs, insurance costs, etc. So that will give you an idea of the impact of the different consequences of climate change. And then the mitigation side. This report was done in 2007 based on global emission in 2005. That report told us that the tourist sector is basically producing 5% of the global CO2 emissions. And did not calculate other indirect impact, like, for example, the radiative effect, which is the one caused by the emission of planes. But in order to be comparable with other sectors, we have chosen just to use the CO2 emissions. Just 2 days ago, a new report was released by UNWTO, whereby a new calculation was done on the CO2 emissions, but of transport only. Now, while in 2005, the whole tourist sector produced 5% of the global emission, in 2016, only transport related to tourism amount to 5%. So basically, we haven't reduced, but actually we have increased. There has been no calculation done on the impact of accommodation. But if we were to project about the same amount, then we will say that the amount of tourism emission has increased by about 20% in the last 15 years. So instead of reverting, I think we're doing worse. Now, this is mostly due to the increased number of travels. As you know, international travels grows about 5% a year. Domestic travels increase even faster. And even if there is no precise statistics, there are several and several billions more domestic travels than international travels. So how can we do to reduce the impact and the production of CO2? One is a change in transport behavior, either shifting to train when it's possible instead of plane, choosing closer destinations, or then changing management practice. Instead of meeting in a conference, video conferences. And some of us try to do that. Sometimes we believe that it's good at least once a year to meet all together, but it's true that I think we are becoming all more conscious, and when it's possible, try to video conference and to reduce the travel time. Second, more important, improving energy efficiency. That is to carry out the same operation with a lower input. This is with the increase, for example, of aircraft engineering. They change maybe to biofuel, etc. And then, of course, renewable, changing from fossil fuels with renewable fuels, solar, hydro, wind, and solar, and so on. Okay, so this was just a short introduction just to put the context, but now I would like to call first of all our panelist, Gerben, to give us the perspective from the Dutch Travel Associations on how you perceive the challenge of climate change, how are you addressing it, how is it perceived by your clients, etc. Gerben.
Yeah. Yes, welcome everybody. Yes, I'm from the Dutch Travel Trade Association, and like 5 years ago, we already saw one of the big challenges would be the travel impact, the huge CO2 emissions that we have with sending holidays, sending people all over the world. And we found out that we actually, if we want to manage our carbon footprint, then we really have to measure it first. And it came out that there was no actually a good calculator to measure the carbon footprint of traveling. And then I'm not only talking about flights or transportation, but also about accommodations and also local transportation, excursion, and activities. So that's when we developed a carbon calculator called CarmaCal. We won prizes, UNWTO Innovation Award in 2017, WTTC Award in 2016. And actually we found out that we actually underestimating our carbon footprint. The ICAO calculator, which is the global standard, is 35% less when it comes to the carbon footprint of flights. So we found out that we're not only underperforming, but also underestimating our carbon footprint. So it was a real journey and getting to get actual data into the calculator, which is quite a challenge. So airlines were not available for putting real data into the system. We had a talk with cruise lines. They told us, we're not going to do it until we are obliged to do it. Accommodation providers were not willing to put data into our calculation. So we're still having a sort of calculator which is, well, the best for the moment, but which is still far from perfect. But I really think that as a travel trade, as a sector, that we have to make business responsible to be open and transparent about the carbon footprint. I think it is essential to show who is performing well, who is doing enough, and who is doing worse. Because there are bad performers, and I think also by the calculator of ICAO, we're still protecting the bad performance. And I think we should provide incentives for those who are performing well, and also invite them and make it compulsory to add real data on their carbon footprint. Because if we're not going to be open and transparent and not measure our real carbon footprint, it will be a hard way to actually manage it and to reduce it. So from our Travel Trade Association, we think carbon management is essential in reducing the carbon footprint. And we also work with lots of front-runners, tour operators who really want to be open and transparent about the carbon footprint, but then they need real data. We also see that from a consumer perspective, it's very hard. They don't understand what's this 1,000 kilo of CO2 emissions. But we also realize that we can nudge consumers towards more sustainable alternatives. For example, we've got a tour operator who's open and transparent about the carbon footprint of their travel to Tuscany in Italy. So you can go there by car, you can go there by train, you can go there by flight. So they're open, they show it in a circle, the carbon footprint of transportation, accommodation, excursion activities. And then what they do, they actually say, okay, we want you to have an enjoyable vacation in Italy, but you can also have a sort of slow travel experience. Go there by train, have a nice stop in Germany or Switzerland on your way, having a stroll or doing cycling in the city of Munich or Zurich, and then go along and go to the next states in Italy. You will be very refreshed, and your journey already starts when you arrived in the train. So it's really having a new perspective on that. We also found out that 32% of all the flights leaving Amsterdam are within a distance of 750 kilometers. So really there is a huge challenge there as well. We could easily replace that by more sustainable transportation. So there is, we need to improve our communication to help customers to make more responsible choices. And so that's also why I really pledge for open and transparency about the carbon footprint of traveling. In addition to reducing our CO2 emissions, we also think that CO2 compensation in the transition period is a way to move forward. I don't say it's the perfect solution, but I think it's better than doing nothing. And in the transition phase, you can actually compensate climate actions and help local people in destinations that are suffering most from climate change. But we also think that we need to go from offsetting to insetting, to reducing the CO2 emissions in the supply chain. And therefore, within the ANVR, we have actually 4 pillars. We want to have a different transportation choice. So we would like to offer alternatives to customers for flights, train, bus, cars, etc. We clarify the benefits of the transportation choice. We think it's essential to have a freedom of choice to communicate clearly and transparently to the customer, and we want to remove barriers from different modes of transportation, so particularly for the distances shorter than 750 kilometers. So that's our strategy, and I'm really open for discussion later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gerben. Now, David Simmons, Professor David Simmons, who is the chair of EarthCheck, but also do a lot of researches, of which he will tell us in the next few minutes.
Thank you. Let me find the presentation here. To shut that one, yeah. Try this one. Good. Ooh. It's an interesting language. Yeah, we're there. Kia ora, everyone. Thank you, Luigi. My name is David Simmons, and while I work with the EarthCheck platform, I'm based down in New Zealand, about as far away from here as you can get. So I want to really make the most use of my carbon while I'm up here. I followed a suggestion from Luigi to the panel about, is the tourism sector meeting its obligations? And I've called this a provocation or science check. So many of the messages will be the same, but I think they might be a bit sharper than Luigi's. So one of the problems with a situation like this is that it is very hard to know where to focus. So we worry about the global situation. We acknowledge the great work that's been done in the Azores as being the first archipelago to be certified. We talk about destinations, and many of us work in destinations. We talk about the different challenges now between destination management versus destination marketing. I want to also talk about intersectoral competition. We obviously focus on businesses, but you know what? We can do the same sort of things in our home. They're all accommodation, service, energy in, water in, waste out types of units. So this is a continuous sort of platform where the science is pretty straightforward. So we do know many of the lead indicators are right across this platform because of detailed measurements. So I'm just going to go through these pretty quickly. But for example, a business example, this is water use per person night in a 5-star resort in Asia. So tropical. And you see when they get to start measuring, they track their performance, they work together as a team, and over time they're able to reduce their water on a per person night. Now, to reduce water means that people doing housekeeping, the gardeners, the pool maintainers, the car washers, everybody has to be involved. So this is a human resource strategy as much as it is any other strategy, because we know people who work in businesses with a strong environmental ethic are happier workers. They are working for a purpose in the same way as we can talk about business with a purpose. I'll just go back. We also want to talk a little bit, we've done some work in the EarthCheck Research Institute on the white paper, and this is where the questions of justice come in. So on a good day, a tourist will only use about 6 times as much water as a local, but in many places it's 12 times, and if you have big grounds or a golf course, it can be 16 times as much water as a local. So this is very difficult when you go to Asia and you pop in and have 2 or 3 showers a day, go to the pool, go outside the gate and see locals carrying water on their head or in pots beside them. This is not just development, and it's not the intention of tourism development to support communities. We can also talk here, Stuart mentioned this yesterday, Kaikoura, this example, and what Kaikoura did, they worked together and they reduced their waste to landfill. I think this graph would be a bit better the other way up, but they reduced it by 76% over a number of years, and they have maintained that. Now, you don't reduce waste in a town just by the city engineer or the mayor telling you to. You do it by concerted action. So one of my favourite quotes is, for extraordinary things to occur, all that is required is for 1,000 ordinary people to hold hands and to step forward. So Kaikoura has done that. They have been in the EarthCheck platform, I think, for close to 20 years. And with my colleague and friend Susanna Becken, we've done work on different energy use per tourist type. And interestingly enough, the blue is transport, the red is accommodation, the yellow is activities, and we all say get on a coach, but the coach tourists use the most energy per day. Why? They travel the furthest, and then they stay in hotels with big central platforms with bars, restaurants, swimming pools, and the like. So we're starting to use this to say, okay, what is a good sort of form of tourist for us? So rather than saying, you know, we want everybody, we're saying, what sort of tourists take us to where we want to be closer as a country? So I will also talk here on the next slide about international travel. And so this is addiction to oil, energy use and travel to and within New Zealand. Now, we sit at the bottom of the world. We can't shift from car to train, possibly rowboat to sailboat or aeroplane, but we don't have these choices. And I'm sure my friend from Vanuatu, I feel more worried for him than I do for us, because at least we can adapt. So there's the air flights you see by distance, and along the bottom, there is the ratio of energy used in New Zealand in terms of megajoules of energy. So what this means is that for New Zealand, 91% of the emissions and energy from tourism come from transport. 70% of it from going to and from the destination, and another 70% within the destination. Hands up, 8,000 kilograms of carbon with you here today. That is a half of the average for New Zealand. So some years ago, we used to say any trip to Europe, whether it was 3 days or 3 months or for a year, used about as much energy as 1.5 New Zealand families did for a year. So we've got nowhere to go. We're staring into the headlights of this. So moving right on, another paper just came out 2 weeks ago, I think, in the Annals of Tourism Research. A very interesting piece of paper, again, by Susanna and Kamagani. And they looked at what happens with low mitigation, essentially no price on carbon, but these mounting sort of impacts that Luigi talked about. And that's the top dotted line. Increasing price on carbon and some climate damage because people don't want to go to destinations, or a very high price on carbon. That would essentially mean a trebling of airfares pretty much overnight, if we're starting to pay into the cost of what damage tourism does. So just to finish off, Luigi mentioned this paper coming out a couple of days. The World Tourism Organization are beginning to square up much more to this. They still want to talk about net. We have to talk about gross. We cannot go out and say to our farmers in New Zealand, we want to reduce your emissions twice as fast towards 2050, because we've got people who still want to fly around the world in aeroplanes. So we are completely in the wrong quadrant as far as science is concerned. And unfortunately for tourism, the energy intensity of avgas is such that there are no ready replacements. Certainly not in the 2040, 2050 maybe timeline. So 2 slides to finish. Are we meeting our obligations? Our obligations to sustainability, best expressed as the UN SDGs, and as I said, many of these raise serious questions about just development and climate equity. To a carbon-constrained economy, I think we sit here and we talk in our own wine glass. We don't talk about the carbon intensity of agriculture versus the carbon intensity of tourism. We don't talk about water use and its efficiency in tourism compared with its productive capacity in agriculture. Just about everywhere we go, we talk to ourselves. And when you look at a catchment, as I do as a human geographer, we have got to look about optimizing resources for human use. We have great confusion or maybe blindness about net versus gross measures, and to measure and manage our key inputs and outputs. So we know what these are. So one of the questions I have is, where are the tourism scientists? And they are not strong enough, they are not bold enough, but I do encourage you to reach out to your universities, not just your marketing departments, but your physicists, your geographers, and others. So my final slide here, I see Luigi sort of looking over his shoulder here. So in summary, we are not doing our bit, and I was looking for one of those little Giphy things that the millennials use. I found one with Greta going, no, 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 And then I found another one, and I thought maybe it's abrupt. It has said, you have lied to us. And I wonder if we are lying to ourselves about tourism as well when you look at what else we do as societies. So the conversations and science are isolated from other productive sectors and the SDGs. So simple statement, we produce more emissions from tourism per $1 million of value add to the New Zealand economy from tourism than we do from agriculture. Simple question about humans. Are we going to feed our people or fly them around the world? So, you know, we've kind of got, unless we actually mitigate hard and fast now, we have got nowhere to go. When you see what is written in the 2050 Accord, and you see that aviation has finally been brought into it. Tourism produces greater than its proportional share of global GDP. So 5% emissions from aviation has risen perhaps to 7%, as Luigi said, 3.9% of global GDP. So it is a sooty business, whichever way we look at it. And while we've been sitting here, I've been writing on climate change since 1998, so you know, it's been a burning issue. Tourist behaviour is turning against us. So we've got flight shaming, we've got train bragging, and all these sorts of things, and the public are seeking out their own solutions. So the situation is urgent. We must measure to manage, and we must engage with a new environmental paradigm. I think we are in a very serious state. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, David, for your very strong and clear statement. It seems that one of the problems is not everyone measures, and one of the problems is that there's no comparability and homogeneity into the way those, for example, 8 companies that decide to measure, they're not comparable. And to me, another problem is that tourism as such is not a sector in the negotiation of the climate change conference. So there is not even, it's transport, but that includes good transport. So it's also difficult to set targets, because setting a target, as you would say in another, is very important to be able to work toward target, but there is not such technical possibility at this point for tourism. So now Olaf Sleeper, who is the Innovation Manager at the German National Tourist Board. Olaf.
Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for the invitation. It's a real honor for me to be able to talk to you and to present what's going on in Germany, in German tourism, to be more sustainable, to reduce our carbon footprint. My name is Olaf Sleeper. I'm Innovation Manager at the German National Tourist Board, working there for 20 years now, and responsible for digital solutions together with other colleagues, but mainly focusing on sustainable travel and accessible tourism. And I've got a few slides to give an introduction about our work. You know, Germany is very popular, and we now are going to celebrate the 10th success story according to the growth of tourism per year. So Germany has never been so popular as now. We now reached 84 million overnight stays, and it goes on and on. It's a success story. But things change, and thinking changes, and it's not only about growth anymore. So in the tourism regions, in the companies, and also in the government of Germany, new aspects appeared. And now it's more about a quality tourism strategy, which is written in our targets. And it will also be a major part of the new tourism strategy of the German government, focusing on tourism that really creates and maintains spaces worth living in harmony with nature and culture, and it contributes the quality of life for all people, now also focusing on the locals more than we did before to prevent over-tourism. And of course, all this together should build a very positive image of Germany as the destination in the world.
We, in 2012, even decided that sustainability from now on is a part of the core brand of Germany. And we built up a tourism strategy to be more sustainable on 3 columns. The first column is being better as an organization by ourselves. We did certifications. We started to do only green meetings and trying to be more sustainable as a company. And as a tourism marketing organization, we are highly dependent on high quality and reliable products, especially if it comes to sustainability. So we are also very active in cooperation with our partners to create sustainable tourism solutions, to know about the demand, the international demand for these, from tour operators, from customers. And so we are very active on workshops and presentations and so on to get in close contact to our partners. And the third column is, of course, communicating Germany or positioning Germany as a destination with reliable, sustainable tourism products. But we see some challenges. You know, we need political and also strategic guidelines. And there we see a huge change within the last years on a national level, but also on the regional level. And the regional level is maybe more important than in other countries if it comes to tourism, because there is no central tourism organization in Germany. We are the tourism board, but only responsible for promotion outside Germany. But there's no steering tourism organization within the country. We have 16 federal states, like Bavaria, you may know, and they are responsible for tourism. So it's important that they react, that they take action. And all their tourism strategies had sustainability on page 60 somewhere 10 years ago. And now it's a framework for all tourism actions they do. And this is a dramatic change. Also in the governmental tourism strategy, which is going to be set up within the next 3 months, I guess. And on the other hand, next to strategic guidelines, you need knowledge and motivation. So a lot of competitions are going on. We created, together with our partners, a really smart guideline for tourism experts. What is it about? What is sustainability? What KPIs are there? What best practice do we already have in Germany? And this is really a success story, and even other countries like Switzerland ask if they can adapt this guideline for their country, which is a real honor. And motivation, it must be fun. So don't raise your finger and say you have to do that. You have to convince people that it's a good thing and to follow you on the way of sustainability. Digitalization, you know, we created an own description of sustainable tourism because we have not been satisfied with other descriptions which have been available, because most of them are missing digitalization and accessibility. And digitalization is really key. If you're talking about modern tourist cards where you really can learn about tourism behavior, if they're working electronically, or there are tools for the future to steer even tourism streams, you know. So it's really important to rely on digital solution, also in communication, and we need networking. One example, in the Black Forest, one of the well-known areas in Germany, they offered a tourist card, and if you stay more than 1 night, you get a special tourist card, and this grants you access to 7,000 square kilometers of area, and you can go there for free by public transport and sometimes even by e-cars. So that's a real good solution to get the carbon emission down. And these guys, although they are competitors in Germany, talk to other regions and teach how to do that, how to finance that, and how the clients react on that, and so on. So there's a lot of knowledge exchange within the tourism industry. But nowadays, you already mentioned it, we have a dramatic change from destination marketing to destination management. And that needs also to talk to other branches, because tourism is highly dependent on transport, on energy management, waste management, and so on. So the cooperation is going much better now than we had it before. And we need third parties qualified certification to prove the sustainability for the customer, for the travel trade. Without certification, you can't communicate reliable tourism project. And the major challenge we saw as a marketing organization, that the sustainable tourism products in Germany have not been visible, even not within Germany and especially not for foreign travelers. So we created a map putting all together the reliable certification labels like Bio Hotels, Bio Bono, Green Globe, whatever. So together with experts, we filtered out the really reliable, good certificates, and they now send us more or less in real time their products within Germany. So it's really easy, if you know where you want to go to Germany and within Germany, to find sustainable accommodation around, from eco-camping places up to star-rated hotels. And this is really a game changer, to make sustainable hotels visible with a really low amount of time and energy. And my last slide is to inform you about a new campaign. Together with our 16 federal states and an expert, we filtered out the best practice of sustainable tourism solutions. So we found about 60 hotels who are far ahead of the standard of sustainable hotels. Tourism regions, cities will be visible on a new microsite, and a huge social media campaign will start on Facebook and other platforms to make these new products visible, to convince people that there are really reliable, sustainable tourism products in Germany, that they're not necessarily more expensive. And you see, the focus is on the benefits for the client. So it's all good for you. It's about quality, good taste. You do something good for the nature, for the climate. So very positive way of communication. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Olaf. As you mentioned, certified destination, just to make the remark that the GSTC criteria, both for destinations and industry, hotels and tour operators, do contain specific criteria on climate change issue, on measuring CO2 emissions, on how an hotel or a destination address the issue of reducing these CO2 emissions. And that aspect has been confirmed, even somehow strengthened in the revision of destination criteria that were announced by Randy, and that will be out early January. Well, Jerry Spooner, he did not prepare a presentation. He was in another panel recently, but I would like him as a representative of one of the small islands. We always speak about small islands as being those who produce less CO2 emissions but suffer more from the impacts of the CO2 emissions, both in terms of the direct impact, as I mentioned before, and possibly in the indirect impact, for example, reduction or higher cost of long-haul flights. So, Jerry, can you tell us directly from your experience how has been climate change impacting your destination, Vanuatu, and what kind of measures are you taking, are you planning to address those?
Thank you. For Vanuatu, small island countries in the Pacific, climate change, it's very evident considering the fact that most of our tourism activities are based along the coast, tours, and mostly accommodation. So apart from sea level rise, we see erosion of coastlines, and the fact too also in that tourism is based along the coast. Tourism in the industry itself is seen as, is perceived as the biggest culprits in destroying the environment, from coral dredging to mangrove, cutting down of mangroves. And so we evidently see the impact of climate change and our effort to being involved in addressing that. We have just, which I'll talk on a bit more on tomorrow, or sorry, later this afternoon, is that we have started our journey towards sustainable tourism by having developed our sustainable tourism policy and working closely with the Ministry and Department of Climate Change, Environment, Fisheries. So it's a joint effort to show in the perception towards tourism being the culprit. We are somehow, I believe, taking lead to showing that we note that and we're trying to correct that. So just listening to the previous presenters, we have our not just our sustainable tourism policy, but we have our local certification program too. That in the process that is compulsory. We have our voluntary certification program too, that addresses a lot of this work that we are doing with climate change, the ministry, and also GSTC, not just destination criteria, but the industry criteria. So serious to the sense where not just Vanuatu, but the other Pacific Island countries, the commitment to show that we are serious with addressing climate change. Recently, we note in the Pacific Islands foreign ministers meeting held in another member country in Tuvalu. We note that there was no interest from the Australian government to commit. So our next meeting next year in Tuvalu, we're hosting in Vanuatu. Our government has made it clear in that if Australia is not going to commit, then we're not going to invite them. They're not going to sit in. So that's how serious we are. Australia's response in that they think it's important if they focus on more coal, they bring in their coal industry, developing their economy so they can give us more aid. But the aid will, we know, go towards infrastructure as this very focused on competition with China in the infrastructure journey. Yeah? So, yes.
Thank you, Jerry. I remember in the Copenhagen conference 2009, the president of the Maldives showed a video. And in this video, he was sitting with his cabinet on the bottom of the sea. They all have diving bottles with the table on the floor. And that was a signal to see how dramatic it was for islands, especially the Maldives, which are flat. Would you share that dramatic message from the small islands to the international community that act now, act fast? Would you share that message?
Sorry,
would you agree with that message of urgency?
Yes.
Yes.
Definitely.
Good. Well, we already have a very interesting question. On Slido, everyone knows, is an expert on Slido, so I think that you can look at the questions, we'll put them on the screen on your mobile phone or your tablet. And I think the question that got voted more, got a strong support, is one from Xavier Font that says, how do we force the tourism industry to take responsibility for its impact? Because producing food is an essential human need, but going on holiday is not. So maybe, David, would you like to start framing a response to that? And then maybe I would like also Olaf and Gerben to give your views on whether compulsory measures, is that a possible, is a solution? And if so, how, or is not a solution?
Yep, good. So, look, I think the human species has evolved to a place where possibly one of the only values we recognize now is our wallets. So I think probably the way to get them to take responsibility in the first case is to pay for the non-market things that they use, ecosystem services. So in this case, it would be free air. And people segue into calling it a carbon tax. It is not a tax. It is a shadow price for the damage that it does. So it is a carbon price. Garno in Australia, he got this right. He talked about a carbon pollution reduction scheme. Now that would be in the scenarios we put up. Would be saying, okay, this is the damage that we estimate that carbon causes, and it wouldn't just be a trebling of airfares. I think maybe it would be here 100 or 120 euros to fill your car with petrol or diesel, because that's the damage that mobility does, and that gives a signal to people to change behaviour. The other thing I would say is that in itself isn't just in terms of the developing world. So when we were at Davos, I have seen ministers of certain countries almost in tears talking about the importance of their 100,000 visitors to their economy. And that may well be the case, Jerry, with Vanuatu. So I've been cooking this idea, and maybe it's something that GSTC could look at, or the UNWTO. In New Zealand, what the government is proposing is that people who want to buy big petrol or diesel cars for going skiing, they will pay a carbon tax, and that tax will be subsidised against electric cars. So electric cars will come down, fuel guzzlers will go up. So what would it look like if we said, okay, we've got 35% of the travellers transatlantic, China's moving, but once you get below those equatorial countries, of whom about 90% have tourism as their #1 foreign exchange, is actually we carbon subsidise a flight to Vanuatu, or to Nepal or Costa Rica, developing countries, by getting Peter to pay Paul. Unfortunately for New Zealand and Australia, we are developed countries, we still have nowhere to go, but we may just have to man up to that. So I think in the first instance, pricing with a development lens might be a way forward.
Yes, I can agree on that as well. I also think that there's now a production of synthetic kerosene in the Netherlands, which is a combination of, it is actually a biofuel, but it's a combination of CO2 and hydrogen, and that can also reduce the CO2 emissions when it comes to flights. So I think it should be made compulsory within the European Union. I think the European Parliament indicated that they want to go for smart and sustainable travel and tourism as well. So the ACTA also announced that a couple of days ago. So the way to move forward is yes, we need to have more compulsory arrangements within the European Union, because we have seen that otherwise, if you just ask the private sector to do it on a voluntary basis, it will not work at all. So we really need to have a combination of providing incentives to have price mechanism. So I still think it's unlogical that if you're polluting the most, you can be still like the cheapest in price, which is ridiculous. And also when they fight slots at the airport, well, they don't make any distinction if you are an airline which has more energy efficiency or produces less noise, so there's no distinction there as well. So we really should come back to normal and think, well, you also have environmental impacts calculated into the price as well.
So a combination of compulsory and market measure, yeah. Olaf?
Yeah, we really rely on innovation and consequent action, and it takes place already, even with the big players. So let me give 4 short examples. Starting with ourselves, we are organizing once a year a huge event, incoming event for Germany with 1,500 participants from all over the world, journalists and buyers from all the big companies and OTAs. They come to Germany and meet suppliers. And in former times, we had a thick book showcasing all the suppliers. The suppliers brought loads of brochures and roll-ups with this awful aluminium food and so on. So we said, Don't bring brochures anymore, just present by a tablet. Don't bring your roll-up. We will have a recyclable poster on the wall, which has even a higher visibility than your roll-up. And don't come by car. And we offered that they can use a really cheap ticket by German Rail. And so now every year they still come and go. And it's about 200,000 kilometers. They're now driving with German Rail and the car stays at home. So it's about 90 tons of carbon we save. And there still, of course, come a lot of people from overseas markets. And now we offset all our flights throughout the year, and it's about 300,000 kilogram of carbon we offset now. Because we can't avoid these flights, so we offset the flight. But more important are investment of the big players in Germany. The German Rail, for example, they invested a lot of money to build new tracks, use new technology and new trains. And for example, there's a connection between Munich and Berlin. It's 620 kilometers. In former times, it took you about more than 6 hours to go there. Now they reduced the travel time under 4 hours. And the airlines can't compete anymore. So they stopped flying. They reduced the connections from Munich to Berlin. So the carbon emission goes down a lot. I don't know if the figures, but you can imagine if several airlines don't fly to Berlin anymore because the railway is there and it's used heavily. Third example is Lufthansa itself. They decided to be a plastic-free airline. They just produced 160 million cups to be reusable. They want to get rid of 220,000 pieces of plastic until 2020 and more 370 pieces of plastic until 2021. So they're really taking action. And the fourth example is Ada Cosmetics. It's one of the biggest suppliers of hotels and cruise ships in the world. And they just decided, as a German company, to only follow the economic cycle and the resource cycle, you say, the cradle-to-cradle principle. And this will have a tremendous impact on energy use for the production, on waste limitation, and garbage presentation. Yeah, you don't know. So these are quite good examples that there is action. Even the big players take action. There's always place for improvement, but they are responsible, and we try to do our best as a national tourist board to also create tourism products without more sustainable and convincing travelers to choose these kind of products and make them visible.
Yes, thank you. Well, certainly I do believe that, for example, when we're talking about Europe and we're talking about short and medium range distance, I mean 200 to 600 kilometers, it really doesn't make sense, all those flights, and they should be probably subsidized, an incentive of producing trains, etc. Now, to go to an island or to come from New Zealand, unfortunately, I think at this point, the only way that one could reduce is improving the technology of the planes, lighter, more effective, and reducing the, let's say, the quality of the fuels, etc. I mean, this is the. You wanted to
on that, and that is that the paper produced, I think it was alongside the UNWTO one from Griffith and Surrey University, points out that some of the carbon capture technologies are not scalable yet, and the problem is the lead time to market. And so, if we are serious about 2050, then I think we've got to get beyond the point of sort of, I don't say fooling ourselves, but get over the hopefulness and actually look to a different reality. Because you can have quite fast innovation in surface transport, but because of the safety concerns, the volatility of fuels and those things, it's a much, much longer path to market. And it's great to have the innovation in the wings, but unfortunately innovation isn't in the wings, if you know what I mean. In other words, it's great to be talking about the innovations, but the lead time to market seems to be completely against them, alas.
We'll address the question, Moderator, but first I would like to address, I'll give my comment first, and then if anyone on the questions on why we always take it on air travel when we talk about emission, not about mega cruise. And I mean, the slide I showed before, it was quick, but just to remind you, when we talk about tourist transport, air transport represents 40%, car transport 32%, all other form of transport, including cruises, 3%. Now, I'm not saying that cruise should not do their best, but if you look at the global level, the impact of air transport is much higher. So I think this is the reason why there is more concentration on that, which doesn't mean that the intensity per passenger for cruising could be higher, but if we want to do a meaningful impact, we have to be able to address mostly the air transport. And air transport is, by the way, is also the transport that is growing faster, even according to this last report that was released a couple of days ago. Any of you would like to comment on this point of the cruises, or?
Well,
no?
Just a very quick one. It's a good question. The magnitude of change is quite different, though, and that is that a cruise passenger, as far as I understand it, is using between 5 and 6 times as much energy, and therefore 5 to 6 times as much emission per passenger kilometre. And that's because you're pushing a heavier vessel through a denser medium. And then they're using light crude to make electricity and the like. So it is a difficult sector. I think it's one that's going to be called to account very soon as we get more and more focused on these issues and the factors involved.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so then there is a call to declare a climate emergency today. Well, I think we are in a climate emergency. But I mean, COP25 is on now in Madrid at this point of time, and I think, I mean, everyone is ringing a strong bell and a big bell. I mean, I cannot agree on that, and I mean, we could somehow make it in the summary of the conference or on somehow the final proceedings to highlight that. I mean, that this group definitely want to stress and want to add its voice to the many voices that are calling for action soon. So I cannot agree more. As you have seen from GSTC conference, we always try to do our best in reducing impact. I think you haven't seen a single piece of plastic. You haven't seen a paper. It's just one paper with the summary of the program. And we do offset. So I think we're doing our best, and we want to be consequent with what we're preaching. So yes, we're in an emergency. We can add our voice. Any of you would like to comment on this question or on this request? David or Olaf? You all agree? I agree. I guess. Good. Now then there is another question, or where can we find global data on tourism impacts, emissions, infrastructure, water use, waste, social impact, etc.? Need baseline data to guide industry. David, you have any comment?
Well, the simple point is it's difficult, but some people are attempting to do that. For example, the Global Sustainable Tourism Dashboard, which is a joint venture between Griffith University and Surrey, and I think EarthCheck has invested in that as well, looks at the metrics to bring those together. There are two complicating factors. One is, as you said, the industry has not been very forthcoming with its data, so a lot of it has to be done from top down. And the second one is that because tourism is such a composite industry, you know, that's why we have tourism satellite accounts. It takes quite a lot of calculation to make sure we're attributing the right things to tourism. But that is happening slowly, and I certainly do refer people to the, is it called the Tourism Sustainable Dashboard, or Tourism Sustainability Dashboard? Have a look at there. It's got some great lead indicators on that. It's got different country reports, carbon intensities, and other sorts of things. So That's a great effort, again, by tourism scientists to at least start building that, and I'm sure they're open to any corrections or suggestions on that.
And I also would like to add that I think we have to make it compulsory for the transportation sector at least to actually be open and transparent about the carbon emissions. So if we don't make it compulsory, they will not provide the data. And it helped us also to find out that actually between airlines there are much differences also in the carbon footprint. So for example, if you take a flight from Amsterdam to Havana in Cuba, there were differences of 35% depending on if there was a stopover, depending on the energy efficiency of the flight. So even then, if you have to fly to destinations, you can still make a responsible choice by showing the data on that. So I think that it's really essential that we have to have more pressure on that.
Good. Thank you. Unfortunately, we will have to close the panel now. We are on time, but we have some other meetings now, including our board meeting of the GSTC. So thank you very much to all of you for your participation. Thank you for all the... it's a pity that there are many more excellent questions, but we try to think of a way of how we can collect all the questions in these sessions and others, and see how can we maybe disseminate and make some good out of it. Thank you very much.